Good evening, folks. Thanks for tuning in to our documentary. All these folks sitting behind me got in contact with some family and some friends talking about suffering and death and exactly what that means to them. And right now we're going to watch some of those interviews.
What would you say your views on death are? What do you think happens to you when you die?
I believe that when we die, everyone goes to heaven.
Everyone, even bad people?
If you, ask for forgiveness.
You can go to heaven?
Yeah, you can go to heaven.
Okay, I'm going to read two statements, and you have to identify which one you are most like, okay?
Okay.
Suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and the loss of the things we were attached to causes suffering. The way we can escape suffering is to cut these attachments altogether. I believe you reap what you sow, or if you are a good person in life, good things will happen to you. If you are a bad person in life, then bad things will happen to you. Which one are you more
Probably the second one.
if you're good, good things happen.
Yeah.
If you're bad, okay, yeah. Makes sense. And where do your views on suffering and death come from? What shaped you?
Probably just growing up Catholic, going to church every day.
Okay. Your parents?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you. I interviewed Jordan Wallenberg. She's 22. She's a senior here at Morningside. Her beliefs, you can see, are very Christian-related beliefs. She has a very Western, idealized thinking about heaven, hell. If you're good, you go to heaven. You can ask for forgiveness. There is a place you can go if you're bad, which is hell, which is afterwards. She also has a very Christian belief that if you ask for forgiveness, you will be able to go to heaven. Or, if you're a bad person, you're going to go to hell, but definitely believes in redemption. And she does have Catholic views, which you can see many people have Christian views from where we live and just this part of the country as well. Even if it's not Catholic or anywhere, she just has a very Western way of thinking.
So what are your views on death and immortality?
Death is just another journey into another existence. And as far as immortality, I believe when you leave this physical body in this world, your spirit lives on forever.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you I'm going to read you two statements. You have to tell me which one you identify with most.
Okay.
Statement number one is suffering comes from attachment to these worldly things. And when you lose these things, you begin to suffer.
Right.
So in order to not suffer, you must detach yourself. And then statement number two is reap what you sow. So living a good life will give you a good afterlife, and living a negative life will give you an evil afterlife. So which one do you think you identify most between those two statements?
With number two, because I think karma, if you do good to others, good things will happen to you. If you do bad to others, bad things will come about. And as far as suffering goes, sometimes suffering is good because then you know what a blessing is.
Okay.
So, that's in the long term about suffering.
Okay. So where do your views come from about death, and how has those views, what shaped those views, sorry?
Well, my first time when I seen my dad die, it hurt, and I was mad at God for him dying because I loved him so much. But as I got older, I never got over to him dying, but I just know how to deal with it better. And death is not the end, so we got to teach our kids how to accept death as a part of life, and to teach them that you celebrate when somebody dies, and when they're born, you weep when they come into the world. But as far as my religion goes, I have my own experience with God, and that's how I do things. I really don't, practice like Baptist Christianity or Judaism. I just got my own experience with him, and I got my own personal communication with him.
Did you grow up religious?
Yes.
Okay, so you think that kind of has helped you shape?
Yeah, oh yeah, mama, yeah.
Okay.
She got me right.
Okay. All right, thanks, Dad.
Bye, baby.
So the person I interviewed was 47 years old, and basically through the interview, you can see that he identifies himself more with a Western view of death. He grew up Baptist, but didn't find his relationship with God until his father died. And at that time, he found peace with it because he knew his father was living on in the afterlife. I think he definitely falls into a lot of what we learned since day one with the question is, what is death? He identifies himself with loss of soul, which we learned in which we read it in our Understanding Death book. So yeah, it's pretty cool that he identifies with that. And then the second thing I think he kind of goes with is what Paul and Timothy were saying is living good lives will lead you to a good afterlife. And in the interview, he talks about how his soul will go on to a better eternity, and if he lives a good life, he'll go to a better afterlife, which he said he agreed with the suffering question. So that's pretty cool. So I think he falls into what we have a lot around here is the Christianity view. So yeah.
Name and age.
Johnny Heimsaw, 17 years old and a junior in high school.
Okay. The first question is, what do you think happens to you when you die?
I think it depends on your religion, whether you're Christian or not, or if you believe in some type of God. If you don't, I think you go straight to hell. I don't think there's another option. But I think if you do believe in God, if you're Christian, I think you go to heaven. I think if you have a strong faith, you definitely go to heaven.
Okay. And then, so I'm going to give you two statements, and I just want you to identify which one most relates to you. So the first one is that you believe suffering comes from an attachment to worldly things, and the loss of these things that you're attached to causes you suffering. And then the second view would be that you reap what you sow, or in other words, if you're a good person in this life and you do good things, that you're going to have a good afterlife. Or, if you do bad things in this life, bad things are going to happen to you in your afterlife. Which one?
Well, I definitely don't believe that suffering has to do with attachment to worldly items. I definitely think that you choose your own suffering. So I think if you're a bad person, you can definitely be forgiven. I think your suffering has to do with whether you're a Christian or not. I think you can still have a good afterlife if you suffer it. Like if you're a bad person, you can ask God for forgiveness. You don't have to be a good person your whole life to have a good afterlife, in my opinion.
And then the last one is, where does your views on suffering and death come from, and what has shaped your beliefs on this matter?
My views definitely come from Christianity. I've been a Christian since I was in middle school. I went to Dare to Share, which definitely strengthened my faith, and I go to a church group every Wednesday that shapes my beliefs even more every day.
Okay, thank you. I'm doing a reflection on my sister Johnny. She's 17 years old and is a junior in high school. Basically, she's a Christian, obviously. She strongly believes that if you aren't religious or if you don't believe in a higher power, then you're probably going to go to hell if there is one. And she also believes that you need a strong faith in this life in order to have a good afterlife, which definitely shows that she closely relates her beliefs to Western religions rather than the Eastern religions. Remember, Eastern religions, they believe in multiple gods, and they also believe in reincarnation. So they believe that this life is more of like a circle, like it's just going to keep going. You're going to live and you're going to die and you're going to come back and you live and you die, and that's not what she believes in. She believes more of a linear worldview, or more of like a timeline. So she thinks that you're born, you live your life, and then you die, and you either go to heaven or hell. And what determines if you go to heaven or hell is your forgiveness in this life. So the suffering question, the second question that I asked her, and I asked her if she believed, more towards the Eastern views or the Western views, and she kind of didn't really know if she followed either of them, because she thinks that even if you do live a bad life, like if you're a bad person, that you're able to ask God for forgiveness, and you're able to, say sorry for the bad things that you've done. She, word for word, said, you choose your own suffering. So I think that basically that means that if you're sorry for the things that you've done and you ask for forgiveness, that eventually you will be able to have a good afterlife, if there is one.
What are your views on death?
I think I believe in heaven. I'm not really sure, and I think that's why I'm so afraid of death. It's because not really sure what actually happens after we die.
Okay, I'm going to read you two statements, and out of the two, which one do you most identify with? The first one, suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and the loss of these things we are attached to causes suffering. The way we can escape suffering is to cut these attachments altogether. The second one, I believe you recap what you sow, or if you are a good person in life, good things will happen to you, and if you are a bad person in life, then bad things will happen to you.
I believe in the second one the most. Because, I mean, to an extent, if you're bad things I think will eventually happen to you, and more so because it's just like all the negative things, and eventually that catches up with you. And then when you're good, usually good things do happen to you. I mean, or at least you feel good about doing good things, so it feels like good things happen to you.
And finally, where do your views on suffering and death come from, and what has shaped your beliefs on this matter?
Growing up, I was raised Catholic, and then just over the years, I just kind of started questioning death, I guess, because it's like, who really knows if we go to heaven or not? So it's kind of just the whole questioning things lately, I guess, is what shaped my views.
The person that I interviewed was 28 years old. And as seen, she explains that she was unsure of what she believed in when it comes to death and the unknown and what happens to you after you die. I think we can relate this to a lot of people today because most people are afraid of the unknown, so they don't know if to believe in a heaven or in hell, or they don't know what happens to our bodies or souls once they die, so they just say they're afraid or they're just not sure what happens. I think we can relate this back to the story of Gilgamesh because he was afraid to die as well, and he was afraid of not knowing what happens to him, resulting in him trying to become immortal. So I think it's interesting that people in today's time can still relate to the first religion that was ever documented.
Hey, how's it going?
What's your name for the camera?
My name is Vishal Patel.
And where are you from?
I'm originally from India.
Cool.
I moved to USA when I was 9.
Cool. Got a few questions for you. What are your views on death? And what do you think happens when you die?
What happens when we die? Well, in my religion, we believe that we get reincarnated as something else, and we go through all different species before we come back as humans again, which is thousands and thousands of species.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I believe that. I think when you die, you just die. So,
Okay.
I think everything just shuts off, and you're done.
You just rot in the ground?
Yes.
Okay. Which of the following statements about suffering do you most identify with, and why? 1. Suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and the loss of these things we are attached to causes suffering. The way we can escape suffering is to cut these attachments altogether. 2. You believe you reap what you sow, and if you are a good person in life, then good things will happen to you. And if you're a bad person in life, then bad things are happening to you, and this is why there is suffering. Or, life is full of choices. We have free will and are able to make choices. The consequences of our choices involve suffering, essentially because all of us have the human ability of free will. There is suffering.
I would say the last one.
The last one?
We all have choices. Sometimes we make
Okay.
bad choices, and that ends up with us suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The first one is kind of true too. Where if you're not attached to it, you don't suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Where does your views on suffering and death come from? Like, what shaped your beliefs on this matter?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Where does your views on suffering and death come from? Like, what shaped your beliefs on this matter? Like, why do you have the opinion on these two questions I asked you? Like, where did they come from?
Well, I'm not sure. I just
Family or something?
Family, yeah. My mom, my parents kind of taught me that.
Yeah.
The choices you make, if you make bad choices, you're gonna suffer. If you make good choices, you won't.
All right.
And then death, yeah. My mom and my dad still believe in reincarnation, but I don't.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Become more Americanized?
I guess.
In the last 17 years or
Yeah.
however long you've been here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for that.
For my interview, I interviewed Vishal Patel, my roommate. I've lived with him for about a year and a half now. And I asked him the 3 questions about death, what happens when we die, suffering, what's the reason and cause of suffering, and where his views came from on these 2 matters. And for the first question, what happens when we die, he said that his parents believed in reincarnation because they're Hindu, but he did not when I asked him about death. I believe this is due to the amount of time he's spent in America, which is predominantly Western when it comes to religious affiliations, and the just being surrounded by Western views for so long kind of shaped his views a little bit more on this matter than the first 9 years of his life that he spent in India. And for the second question, he said that the second question where I asked him about suffering and why suffering exists, where it comes from, and what's the cause, he said he most identified with the idea that you reap what you sow. And I believe this is because even though this is a Western view, it's very similar to the Indian idea of karma, which is where if you do bad things happen to you. If you do good things happen to you. So then I asked him a question on where his views came from on this matter, and he didn't really know at first, but he said like his family influenced his views a little bit, but it's pretty clear that the 18 years that he has spent in America has also influenced his views to be more Western and less Hindu or Eastern views on death and immortality.
All right, so what are your views on death? More kind of specifically, what do you think happens when you die?
Well, as a Christian woman, I believe there is a heaven and a hell. I believe that if you live your life the way you're supposed to, you will be able to get where you're going to heaven.
Mm-hmm. So you would kind of say you reap what you sow in a lot of ways.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Life is what you make it.
And then I'm going to read off 2 different statements, somewhat about suffering and death, and then just go ahead and tell me which one you identify with or you think fits you the best. The first one is suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and the loss of these things we are attached to causes suffering. So in other words, we have attachment towards things. If we lose those things, we feel suffering or we feel bad about it. The way that we can escape this suffering is to cut these attachments altogether. So we escape suffering by releasing these attachments, by not being attached to anything. And then the second view, or the second statement is, I believe you reap what you sow, or if you're a good person in life, good things will happen to you, and if you're a bad person, bad things will happen to you.
I believe the second statement to be more true, but I also believe that if you do bad things, that you can be redeemed from these bad things as a Christian.
Okay, and that's I've kind of thought that about myself too, as if, just because you're a bad person or you've done bad things doesn't make you inherently bad, We all kind of get a second chance in God's eyes. I kind of feel that. All right, identifying with that second one. It makes sense being Christian and things of that nature. And then the third one, or our third question is, where do your views on suffering and death come from? What shaped your beliefs on this matter?
Well, as a youngster, as an infant, I was baptized Catholic. My family fell away from the Catholic Church. My mother was a convert and to the Catholic religion. As a child, she was brought up Presbyterian, so therefore I went to the Presbyterian Church as a young person. Later on in life, I met my husband, who was brought up in the Lutheran faith. I married him and took instructions in the Lutheran faith and became a Lutheran when I married Don.
Okay, so you would say that pretty much your views all kind of stem from a foundation in Christianity, and
yes, I do.
That would tie into the you reap what you sow, or if you're good, you'll go to heaven, and bad, you might get a second chance, or
you definitely have a second chance, because as a Christian, I also believe that Jesus died for our sins, and we are saved in that respect.
Okay, that's pretty much it. I mean, is there anything else that we pretty much hinted on everything that you kind of wrote down and stuff like that. I mean, it's your background, so it's just strictly your opinion and what you believe. So.
And I have no fear of death. You shouldn't fear death because it's just part of living. It's all in life. And you're born to die.
And that's one thing I was going to ask you about too, at least being of the older generation. I mean, you've been probably around death more than I can say I have, being 22 years old. Does it shape you differently, or do you become more acclimated to it? I mean, it doesn't ever lose its sting or lose its, sadness, but do you become more accustomed to it?
You accept it more. As a youth, life is all about living. And you don't think of death or dying when you're young. As you get older and you lose some of the people you love, then you accept death more.
All right. That's about right. So the interview that we actually watched was of my grandmother. A little bit of context on her that probably wasn't explained in the video. She's 78 years old, and she was born and raised or brought up in small town, South Dakota, a town called Marion. And so a lot of her background, a lot of her upbringing is small town, agricultural Christianity, I guess, Midwestern Christianity, that a lot of us can relate to. As far as reflection goes, she agreed with a lot of the things that I thought she would agree with, and she stated a lot of things I thought she would say. Just personally, what I know about her, I know she's always been really adamant in her faith. I knew that she was definitely going to believe in this idea of a heaven and a hell, or an afterlife. One thing that surprised me though was the passion, I guess you could say, for even if you're a bad person, you get a second chance. She was really adamant about that. Whereas if you contrast it with my grandpa, he's kind of an eye for an eye type of person. And so if you're a bad person, you might be screwed. But that was kind of interesting, I thought. Then she identified with the second statement more so than the first statement that I gave her, kind of along the lines of if you're a good person, good things will happen to you. Whereas compared to if you're a bad person, bad things will happen to you. And I could kind of figure this just having gone to church with her and knowing her background, I guess, more than anybody else does. She's just always been a firm believer in Christianity, and really, I think she said in the video, life is what you make it. That kind of carries over to if you're a good person, good things will happen, and if you're a bad person, bad things will happen. With an emphasis on the good things. Even if you're bad, that doesn't mean that you can't get into heaven, which I thought was kind of cool. Just her views towards that. Lastly, I was kind of surprised. I knew she'd always been Christian, and I knew that at one point in time she was a different denomination than Lutheran. However, I didn't know she was baptized Catholic and then raised Presbyterian. That was actually really interesting to me, and something that I had found out through this interview that I didn't know before. And then towards the last half of the video, or the interview, she just basically stated what brought her to her beliefs. I knew like before going into this, I knew that a lot of that was my grandfather being raised Lutheran, and then that kind of carried over to my family because we're all Lutheran as well. But I think it just comes down to her having a really solidified faith in Christianity, and to accompany that, a really strong belief that if you're a good person, good things will happen. I probably said it in the video, probably put the words in her mouth, but you reap what you sow tended to be a repeating concept, or this repeating idea. And then what I found was really cool was when we were kind of wrapping it up, if she had any final thoughts or things that she wanted to say. And I had kind of told her what this class was and how we've looked at different things and how different cultures and stuff have interpreted death. That's when she came out and said she doesn't fear death, which I kind of thought was interesting because my grandma fears a lot. This overall idea of death just didn't really seem to bother her. Like she said before, you live to die. Obviously, she has been around death more than a lot of us have, especially myself. And then for this whole concept or idea of death to not really affect her, or to just not be that big of a deal for her, and she just said you learn to accept it. And personally, I was kind of hoping for a more kind of like eureka answer, I guess you could say, or like an aha, this is the answer, this is what happens when we die, or this is how to get over death, or how to get over the sting of death. And she just said you accept it, and it was such a simplistic answer. I was just really surprised when she said that. And having a couple days to reflect on it now, I think it's the most genuine answer she could have gave. When someone dies, we've kind of talked about it in class, we don't have the power to undo anything. We can't deny it, we can't change it, we can't physically undo death. That really leaves only one thing. And so this whole idea of just accepting death was really like a prolific answer for me after I had some time to reflect on it. We're left with one thing to do, and that's accept it. The moment we accept death, we now can move on to accepting other things, to accept that that person won't be around anymore, to accept that our lives might be a little different. But in doing so, we have the ability to grow with this topic. As I said before, I was kind of hoping for a more prolific answer, but then the answer she gave was just authentic. We don't fear it. And that's with a lot of things. If we accept something, we tend not to fear it. Having this sit-down interview with my grandma really opened my own mind. It was great to hear her point of view just because she has experience, and that experience is life. So to sit down and be able to talk with her about certain things really allowed myself to open up my own mind and delve deeper into what I believe in and what I think and things of that nature. And so I appreciated the time that I got with her, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
What are your views on death? And I guess what happens after death?
I feel like death is being a Christian. I know after death that I'll be in heaven.
Yeah.
And those who believe will be in heaven. As far as what we'll be like in heaven, I have no idea. If we'll be younger than ourselves now, if we'll be what we are now, if you are when you die, I have no idea. But I do know that we'll be in heaven, and death is, it's sad, and it's definitely, you can't prevent it. It's going to happen to everybody. For us Christians, we know that it's goodbye for now, but it's going to be happy when God calls us to go to heaven, because we'll see him again.
So I guess let's get into some more specifics. So what do you think happens after you die? You talked about heaven.
Right.
What is your understanding of that process?
In all honesty, I've always thought when you die, I think your spirit, your soul goes to heaven. What actually happens, I don't know. I know there's people who have apparently been dead for a little while and then get resuscitated back and are alive. They'll like write about it, and so some of my views are kind of based on what they went through. What happens the minute you die? I've seen tweets and stuff that say like your brain will play back memories of your life. I don't know how they know that, but I just personally, for me, think when you die, you just leave your body and you just find yourself in heaven. But I just feel like that's what happens. Like once you die, you take your last breath, and I think it's instantly. I feel like I don't think with how awesome heaven is, I don't think God would prevent you from it any longer than he has to.
So which of the following two statements do you most identify with? Okay. Suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and the loss of these things we are attached to cause suffering. So the way we can escape suffering is to cut these attachments altogether. That's statement one. So, life is full of choices. We have free will and are able to make choices. So the consequences of our choices involve suffering. So essentially, because as humans have the ability of free will, there is suffering. So if you'd like me to repeat those again, I can. But which one would you most identify with?
The second one's free will. The first one is
this idea of attachment to things, and that's what causes suffering.
I don't know if you can do both. I think the first one, I like the word attachment, because when you think about like a person who passes away, you had a relationship with them, and especially if you had a close one, you're gonna suffer more. So I think the first statement.
Yeah. Do you think that we could avoid suffering by choosing not to get attached to things?
I think so.
Kind of like
I just think it'd be very dull life
if
you don't have, because the things you're attached to, you're gonna have the most passion about. And if you just choose to stay away from one of those things, I mean, you're not gonna have much purpose. It's okay. It's good to suffer. It's part of the entire healing process. And but I definitely say it comes from the ultimate suffering is his death. But there's also other forms of suffering. Losing a loved one sucks. Maybe preparing for something like a job review, and you personally feel like you have something completely planned out, and then you have a 180 turn of something, and boom, there's going to be suffering in that. You get in a car accident, there's going to be suffering in that. If you can't pay the bills, there's going to be suffering in that.
Mm-hmm.
I try to base my pain and suffering and coincide it with the Bible, what it says.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Bible wasn't written in 2016, so there's completely going to be things that aren't mentioned in the Bible that happen to us today. The big picture, there's going to be death everywhere back when the Bible was written, and now there's going to be hurt feelings back in the Bible as there is now, just kind of stuff like that, that the big picture things, and not as specific, that you can kind of look at from the Bible and relate to now.
So Seth had a very unique view about death, and he was very strong about his particular view of death. And he came out right away and said, "Hey, I'm a Christian," which is kind of bold and kind of already tells me right away exactly what he thinks. And by saying that he believes in going to heaven, and this idea of after you die, your soul or your spirit makes its way up into heaven. This really tells me that he has a view of a Christian-based faith, which he obviously said right away. But it wasn't this idea of, as we've talked about in class, Christ coming down from heaven to take all the living and the dead back up into heaven with him. So this was very interesting. He thought that the soul actually, from the point of its last breath, would recede up into heaven. Now his view of suffering was very unique as well. When talking about the two different questions in which we formulated to sound like an Eastern or a Western religion, we tried to talk about, particularly for the Eastern religions, this idea of attachment or non-attachment. And the other question that was formed for the Western religions was based on this idea of free will, or this idea of reaping what you sow, things of that nature. Seth felt like he identified more with the Eastern religion. I thought that this was very interesting, being he said that he was Christian, but he kind of backed that up by saying, you know what, you kind of live a boring life with this idea of non-attachment and just not attaching yourself to anything. And he said that's kind of boring. So but definitely that attachment, and our attachment to things in this world, actually causes our suffering. The person I interviewed thought that because Jesus Christ had come down and died for our sins, this is why he believes these types of things. This idea is most closely related to the Christian ideas of death and suffering and what it means to die. Well, thanks for watching, folks. Those are some interesting views on suffering and death, but now we're going to kind of have a sit-down conversation of our own personal views about suffering and death with these people behind me. So we'll get into that right now.
Well, I think when you die, you lose your soul, and then your soul goes to heaven. But in order to die, it'd be like the loss of the pumping of the heart, loss of breathing, and then that's when your soul departs. So like when you're dead.
I agree. I think you go to heaven, like
Or hell.
Christian, or hell.
Yeah.
Christian belief on things,
Mhm.
definitely. Heaven and hell.
Yes.
My mom is very, very Catholic, and I believe in when you die, you go somewhere depending on what type of person you were.
Yeah.
So heaven or hell, and yeah, that's what I believe.
Kind of like you reap what you sow. If you're good, you
Yeah.
go
Mhm.
to heaven.
That was similar to what my roommate said when I interviewed him. He's a Hindu, and they believe in karma, and their karma is not like a person judging you; it's just like a force. And it's like if you are good, then you're gonna come back as something good, and if you're bad, then you're gonna come back as like a bug or something like that.
That's cool.
My sister talked about that, like how the two suffering things, she didn't really believe either of them. She's like full on Christian. And she was saying, like, just because you're a bad person in this life, she thinks that if you ask God for forgiveness, that you still have a chance to go to heaven. So I kind of follow
That's
her
how I
views
was
on
always
that.
like brought up. Like if you ask for forgiveness, like even like the worst people
Yeah.
could still go to heaven,
That's
even if like
how
they
I-
like
yeah.
committed a crime.
That's what the person I interviewed said. If you
Yeah.
ask for, and I believe that too. If you ask
Yeah.
for forgiveness, like, and you actually are truly sorry,
You're actually sorry for
Yeah,
what you
for
did.
what you did.
Yeah.
The Dante Alighieri, the thing we did our presentation on, he said that the only difference between people who went to hell and people who went to purgatory were that the people who went to hell went there because they died without being sorry or asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
That was the only difference.
Right.
So it's pretty
And my
old
dad,
idea.
my dad was kind of talking about how suffering is a good thing because then you won't know when your blessings are. So it's kind of, he identified more with question 2, which is like reap what you sow, but he said you can't live unless you suffer, basically, because
Right.
you don't know what's good and bad. So how do you live a good life or a bad life if you don't know what is good or bad?
Right.
Which in order to do that, you have to suffer to get there.
So what's your personal take on that then?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it works. I mean, you have to suffer in order to
Right.
get where you're going. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
example, college, it's hell. Like, we hate it, but we do that to get this degree, you know,
it,
nursing degree, a bachelor's degree.
builds character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I follow it, I guess.
Mhm.
I mean, you raised me, so.
I think that's I like that. Like I spent 6 months in Afghanistan, and death was a part of everyday life. And for a little while, I had to, like, I was pretty much scared a lot.
Yeah.
And but then I realized that death is going to happen, and there's nothing I can do about it because of just the nature of the place I was at. And so
Mhm.
once I accepted there was nothing I could do about it, and it was out of my control, I actually enjoyed my time there a lot.
Yeah.
I played guitar a lot, actually,
cool.
because there's
Mhm.
no internet or
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bad
That's
internet.
awesome.
There's no
Mhm.
TV. Netflix doesn't work there.
Would
Yeah.
you say that shaped you, and then like your dad shaped you? Like that's why you believe what you believe. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
Like, do you like think your parents, I guess, like you
Mhm.
guys as well shaped what you believe?
I definitely think my parents did. Like they always told me like there's no escaping it and stuff like that, and like God has a plan for you. Like no matter like what you try and do, like He's the only one that really knows
Mhm.
like what's gonna happen to you and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, my dad was saying in an interview, like, you have to teach your children to accept death because it is inevitable. Like, it's going to happen no matter what.
Mhm.
And he said something about, like, he was raised to, because he grew up Baptist, but he said he never had a relationship with God until his dad died, and that's when he had the relationship knowing that it was, you're going to die no matter what. So you might as well live faithfully
Mhm.
because you want to go to heaven.
Right.
So, yeah, he said to learn to teach your children to accept it because either way, this is gonna happen to you, you know. So
Mhm.
that was kind of cool.
So
we covered death
Death.
yeah,
and suffering.
yeah.
So what's next?
Oh, well,
Can you
I
do
guess-
the middle question?
so just out of curiosity, how many of you were like brought up in a Christian type style home? Wow.
Okay,
Everyone.
very diverse
Everyone.
group.
But you can see the type of impact it
Mhm.
has on you, like
Yeah.
just the environment that we've grown up in. I mean, in similar views, I guess. You know, we're kind of all similar, you know. But this idea of forgiveness for your sins, and you know, it's in the belief that Jesus Christ died for our sins, that we are granted the keys to the kingdom of heaven. You know, and so this is the idea of where you go after death. You know, in my personal view, it's hard to understand, okay, when a person dies, what happens to them? Okay, yeah, they could be buried, they could be cremated. Does their soul immediately go to heaven? In Revelation, it talks about God coming down to take the dead and the living, you know, what we talked about in class. So is that the time that people go up to heaven?
Yeah.
So what, you know, it's like,
Long
what do you?
time away in the dirt.
It's a long time ago, but you know, it's a question I still have, you know. But in the end, I think there is a heaven.
Yeah.
And it's that simple belief. All you have to do is believe that Jesus Christ came down and died for our sins.
Right.
And once that happens, He will change your life.
Mhm.
And that's my personal view about it.
I would agree.
Me too.
I would say most of people, besides the person you interviewed, probably had that view,
Mhm.
kind of Christianity, something like it.
Yeah.
Actually, my roommate said he moved to America when he was 9, so
Mhm.
he was only in India for about 9 years, you know,
Mhm.
and he's 27 now, so that's been many years, and he's actually become more Americanized. Like he's just a normal guy,
Mhm.
like the rest of us. And he said that he personally doesn't believe in reincarnation.
Mhm.
He just believes that when you die, he said he didn't believe in like heaven or hell either. He just said that he believes that when you die, you're dead. You just rot in the ground.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, that's a little depressing.
Yeah,
It's a little depressing, but
So you just
that's-
cease to exist.
Yeah.
You just.
I can't wrap my head
Yeah.
around
My-
not existing
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, I think that's the human nature of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we get, I mean, not to say our culture is we continually push towards materialism.
Right.
Yeah.
And all the things of this world. It's like we want. Well, we don't want that to ever go away.
Yeah.
So when you're dead, you don't get to have those things anymore. You
Whoever
know?
dies with the most toys wins.
So, yeah, I mean, I can't take my money to my grave because they ain't gonna do much good in there. You know?
Yeah, and I was always told
So-
these things won't even matter. You won't even care when you're in heaven and stuff
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. You
But
care
so-
about
so
so many
hard to let it
things
go.
down here, but up there, it's nothing. Yeah.
But it's so hard to wrap your head around just not existing.
Yeah, and what are you
So-
gonna look like? What are you gonna see?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just the unknown is so hard to grasp. So.
I think so. Does anybody have opposing views? Are we all kind of, please, be bold and talk about them. I'm serious.
My views aren't opposing, but I think are some of the stuff, are we supposed to know? Are we supposed to know what we look like when we go up there and stuff like that? We want to know for ourselves, but are we even supposed to? Does it really matter? Those things, all those earthly things that we think are important to us or a part of who we are, they don't.
Mhm.
Does it matter when you're, in heaven
Yeah.
or wherever you're at?
Yeah.
So
Good
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I just think we try and explain so much. We try and write rules or explanations for all these things, and
Mhm.
maybe some stuff we're just not supposed to.
You're not
Yeah.
supposed to
Yeah.
know.
State.
It's like the whole idea of death, because think about how many, points of view of death. And we have yet to talk about somebody that has died, gone through the afterlife, and come back and told everybody, hey, this is what happens. It's all been theoretical or stories or,
Yeah.
How do you believe
so
in
it's
it's a one-way
Have
street.
you guys ever
It's
seen
only-
that
Can't come
movie
back.
about that little kid that
Yeah.
Heaven is
apparently
real.
yes.
Yeah.
I just watched that
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
this
that's
little
so
boy
good.
I read the
And then you
book,
can
yeah.
not,
Yeah.
how do you not but believe? Because he's what, 7,
Mhm.
6?
Yeah.
Well, the
I
same.
mean, and they can be storytellers with
Right.
details, But have you guys heard any stories of near-death experiences or how they witnessed it?
I haven't.
Okay, well I'll tell you one. I got one. My dad got in a car accident when he was 35, and just completely crumpled the car. And he said he was watching himself getting pulled out of the car, and then he said minutes later he woke up in the hospital. So it's kind of weird because he was in the hospital for he was in surgery for 15 hours, and he said he felt like he was staring at himself 30 minutes and then woke up in recovery. So I mean that's kind of cool if that's he explained it as his soul was watching himself.
Mhm.
So he said he felt his whole body was there, but he wasn't in his body.
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. I thought
Hmm.
just having a near-death experience. So
Yeah.
Like an out of body.
Yeah, out of body, yeah.
That's what it is.
yeah.
I've never heard of any stories of out-of-body experiences, but I was watching a football live on ESPN a while ago, and you guys know who Walter Payton was?
Mhm.
The running back for the Bears in the '85 Super Bowl team. He got sick and then he died. Right? His wife and daughter, I think, was in a car accident, and Walter Payton's number was 34, and the car rolled tons of times, and they should have died, but somehow none of them were even hurt at all, no scratches. And then the car radio, the little clock, broke when the car rolled, and it just said 34, 34, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
That's kind of a good question though. Do you think your loved ones are sending you signs or watching over you?
I
or,
think it's a thing. I mean,
I do.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do
believe
too.
it is. Yeah.
My
yeah,
mom-
exactly.
Helping
They're
you.
believing.
My mom definitely believes that. She always gives me things like whenever I leave, because I've traveled a lot and gone to some places that aren't less than reputable, and she always gives me something to take with me. Like she gave me a necklace of Saint Michael to protect me. She said, and then she gave me when I was deploying for the first time, she gave me a Saint Anthony key, and Saint Anthony is the patron saint of the lost. She says if you take this with you, it'll help you find your way home. And here I am. So
Awesome.
it obviously worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we thank you for your service.
Oh,
Seriously.
no problem.
So it means a lot. I mean, we wouldn't be here today without guys like you, honestly. So seriously.
That is neat. I believe in stuff like that too, though. That they are like looking over you and.
Yeah. So let's tie that to the field trip we took to Christian Funeral Home. Do you think that's why people, like if they cremate the body, they do types of that things? Do you think that's another reason why people want to have those remains with you, or like putting crematory remains
So I
inside?
think they just want to have like a piece of them still with them and stuff like that.
I definitely think that.
Like the necklaces you're saying?
Yeah.
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 Do you think those are related? Those different views of you feel like somebody's watching over you, and then like you said, we're kind of materialistic. That having that tangible aspect of the lost, the people that are gone from you, having that right in your hand.
So you feel like they never really like they're always there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think it's fun.
I think that's what people do with it.
Yeah, I think everybody has like a different kind of like comfort thing. Like my grandma died, and so like all my aunts and my mom, like every time they see like a red bird, like
Cardinal.
yeah, that's how they like.
Ours are doves.
That's like my
and
grandma and stuff like that. So like, I feel like everybody has like something different that like reminds them of them, or like there's.
Yeah, my uncle died in March. And they were triplets, so my two aunts, my uncle, and then at the funeral, I guess. I don't know if it's true or not, but my aunt Jewel lives in Jefferson, and she said that when they grew up, my grandma decorated the room as 3 doves, blue, yellow, and green or whatever, but she said she woke up and there were 3 doves sitting on her windowsill, and it was, I don't know when doves were supposed to be flying away or whatever, but there was doves there, and she thought it was cool because that was their sign. So
that's cool.
And then things like that, you're like, how is that not real? You know,
Right.
like it has to be real.
It just can't be. Everything can't be coincidence.
Yeah.
Like, there's just certain stuff that can't.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been a coincidence, but when you're faithful and you believe in the Lord, that's something that you take seriously.
Yep.
So.
For sure.
34.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
I guess we just.
Oh, well, I was gonna say like that. Like we had a basketball
Izzy.
teammate die.
Yeah.
And like she was a freshman in high school and stuff like that, and like we like beat a team by like her number, and like the scoreboard said like yeah.
Yeah. She was an 8th
I lived here, so Hannah Vanderloo was really close with Izzy
Oh,
too,
yeah.
so I knew.
Yeah, it was halftime or something, and the score was like 22-22.
And like her number, like her basketball number was supposed to be 22.
And then, there's 2 fouls, and then they had 2 fouls. So it's like 22-22.
And like that's the first time like we beat East and stuff like that. So like,
Doesn't she have like a yellow butterfly
yeah,
thing too?
yeah. So like card, like she has a yellow butterfly every time people see that. Like,
Yeah, that's like her sign.
So number 23. Jim Carrey, that movie. No?
Movie. What movie?
Number 23.
That's a movie?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
Normally, I'm very good at quoting movies.
Yeah, it's not a good one. Never mind. Forgot to say it. Jim Carrey is not funny in it. So.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what the heck? I've never seen a Jim Carrey movie that he's not funny.
Serious?
Yeah, he's serious, and he's like haunted by the number 23.
Yeah, doesn't he see it like everywhere?
Everywhere.
And he like starts scratching things and like.
Yeah.
No,
It's
scary.
it's a weird one.
It's scary. Don't
Anyways,
watch it.
kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, that's cool. Any thoughts? Other thoughts?
I think we covered everything.
Let's talk about suffering now, because we really talk about suffering. We talk about the afterlife and death and afterlife.
We hit it on it a little bit earlier.
So, what do you think what is the reason for why we suffer?
I think it shows that you care a little bit, because if you didn't care, then you wouldn't suffer at all. It's kind of like I don't know if you guys know the Buddhist view where suffering comes from attachment to worldly things, and in order to avoid suffering, that you cut out all your attachments. Like you don't care about anything or anyone at all, ever, and that's how you get rid of suffering. And I'm thinking, I'm like, I would rather have the suffering and care about those things than not have those things or not care about them and not have the suffering. To me, it's worth it. So it serves a purpose, I believe. So
yeah,
to not have suffering and not care about those things would be, I think, like I'd feel like a robot, you know. And you wouldn't like what's the point of life at that point? It's very morbid or depressing to me, in my opinion. So
for sure, I think personally this idea of suffering, we're called to suffer. I mean, that's what God told us to do. You know, 1 Peter 2, I think we were talking about. Yeah, I was looking up this stuff before this conversation, but it's like basically the verse says, you know what? Because Jesus died on the cross for you and he went through all that suffering, we too should go through that suffering. I mean, that is like the ultimate death back then, the crucifixion. You're hanging, or is that a text or something? You're hanging on a cross. Like, that is the worst type of death ever. Like, I could not imagine, like, personally, a bodily, like, how much pain that person would be in. How much, you know, the person being crucified. And the Bible says we're going to suffer too. We should strive to suffer just like him. And we should embrace suffering, not shy away from it. And I thought, like, holy crap, like, set me down in a seat. Like, this is, you know, this is nuts, because not a lot of people want to go through suffering. What do? We try to avoid it. You know, it's so hard for us, you know, when you go to a funeral of somebody who dies at a young age and you have attachment to them. We hate, you hate that feeling. You know, we're suffering for that, but that's what we're called to do. I mean, it's like, so my other question, I guess, is, do you think that you can ever evade suffering?
No.
I mean, even if you're the best Buddhist monk,
There's no way.
Buddha himself.
There's no way.
Because, I mean, just having this conversation, say I didn't know you ever in my life. Okay, I come up to you, start talking to you. All of a sudden you tell me that you went to Afghanistan. Right away, I'm already going to feel some kind of, you know, respect for you because of what you've done for our country and everything. I mean, that's attachment right there. Boom. And I don't even know you, you know? And that type of attachment, personally, I don't think you can ever go through life without attachment.
There's no or even just like a death of a child you couldn't even, you didn't know at all.
Like,
you're
you hear a sad story.
Like, you look at like little kids, like
family.
they're barely like even born and they're suffering. You're just like, how and like, and why is that like a thing?
Yeah.
People that haven't even experienced life. 2 months in,
it's not possible. I mean, you don't even have to have attachment to anybody, and you could still be like,
you'd have to be
your
like,
mom died. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you still feel
that
sad.
That sucks, because if it were my mom, that would be awful.
You have to be like
and you
some
just feel bad for
sociopath
people.
like Ted
Exactly.
Bundy to not have any empathy
and even,
for
like,
other human beings.
Exactly.
The
That's
Buddhism,
the only way I would think.
Nirvana is wanting something. Like you I mean, it's a thing. Yeah, Buddhism is a thing, but
thought it was a grunge
in order,
band.
what? Yeah. Nirvana is wanting something, so that's still you're striving for nirvana. So if you don't reach nirvana, you're going to suffer.
Exactly.
And who says you're actually there? You know, it's just, it's weird.
This state.
Yeah.
Of nothing.
Yeah. Suffering is important because, like I said, you wouldn't know what a blessing is without anything going wrong in your life. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like if you don't have suffering, you just have no passion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What is your purpose?
You know, at least I can relate to Ethan because we've played football. You know, how much do we suffer in football? If there was no suffering, there would be no passion behind anything.
No.
You know.
Well, good evening, folks. Tonight. Hello, folks at home. Good evening, folks, and welcome to our little documentary party. Let's start off by watching some of the interviews that we had with.
Different people.
Okay, I don't have a favorite. Chocolate shake. Yeah.
I don't eat McDonald's because I'm not a masochist. So.
I really.
What's that again?
People who hate themselves.